Hi everyone, and thanks again for joining us at the Audioholics YouTube channel. Today we're going to be taking a look at Yamaha's RX-A2040 audio-video receiver. It's part of their Avantage line. You'll be able to find the full written review of this at audioholics.com, but this little video will serve as a companion piece to that article, giving you the quick ins and outs of what to expect out of this high-end receiver. So for starters, you're looking at a 9-channel receiver, 9 amplifiers built into this, each working at 155 watts at 1 kilohertz, 0.9% total harmonic distortion into an 8 ohm 2-channel driven scenario. Those amplifiers can be configured in a number of ways, including using height channels for either Yamaha's Presence technology or the latest Dolby Atmos immersive audio technology. So that's when you've got speakers above you to create a full 360-degree field not only around you, but also getting a little bit of this half dome shape where sound is going above you as well. In addition to that, you're going to find a total of 8 HDMI inputs and 2 HDMI outputs. That, coupled with some 12-volt triggers and an RS-232 port, means that this has everything you need to make this the central brain of a true whole house audio system. In fact, those 2 HDMI outputs can either mirror each other or they can send out separate video signals. A total of 4 different zones of audio is possible, with 2 of those zones being able to incorporate video as well. With the 2040, you do have both 7.1 inputs and 7.2 outputs. So if you're concerned about power, you could easily mate this receiver up with a couple outboard amplifiers to give you more power than you'll probably ever need. The feature set of the Yamaha RX-A2040 puts it squarely up against the likes of Denon's X5200 receiver, but that receiver retails for $300 more, making the $1,700 Yamaha RX-A2040 a comparative bargain. The 2040 clocks in at nearly 38 pounds, which is pretty beefy for a receiver. The Yamaha RX-A2040 is finished in a brushed aluminum finish, which looks very nice. Includes simple controls, which is important. You want to make sure that the unit is easy to use. And then there are more advanced controls, but they're hidden underneath a very smooth fold-down control panel cover. What's nice about the controls behind that cover is that they replicate all the essential functions that you would find on the remote control. So if your remote control is the batteries are dead, you end up losing it, it breaks, you have in the unit itself everything that you need to operate the setup functions, the advanced functions of the receiver. You're never going to be left in the lurch when that vulnerable control goes missing or broken. Speaking of the remote control, it is completely on par with most other remotes that you'll find in the various AVRs in the industry, which is to say, it is not fantastic by any stretch. What you have is a lot of similarly sized buttons, very well crammed together to make them as hard to find by touch alone as possible. The key buttons, including your volume control, is easier to find. They are more distinctly shaped, they are larger. Yamaha also includes a smartphone app, which is fantastic. You can run on a tablet as well. And in this day and age, when we're so used to using these types of devices, it makes switching some of the more advanced functions a little more intuitive. One of the first things that you'll want to do when you get the receiver is, of course, run the setup routine. This is the piece that sets your distance, your crossover, your levels, using the included microphone. And I found the Yamaha was spot on there, double checking everything with my sound level meter and my tape measure. So at least in my room, I would say there are absolutely no concerns about Yamaha really dialing in your speaker configuration. The auto setup routine also gives you access to Yamaha's automatic parametric EQ. You can run up to 8 positions, and you can also manually adjust the results when it's all said and done. So there's a whole lot of flexibility in Yamaha's auto EQ setup. Moving on to listening, I ran this system through my standard setup, which you can go to the article to take a look at all the equipment involved. But a couple highlights. With the exception of my standard 5.1 setup, I was very fortunate to have a few RBH MC4C speakers on hand, and with those I was able to address a Dolby Atmos setup, which is a 5.1.4 system. That's 4 speakers overhead, 2 towards the front, 2 towards the rear. Now I used this setup in 2 different rooms, and one was a large room with a vaulted ceiling. Because of that, I wasn't able to actually put the speakers overhead or use reflecting sound technology. So instead, the speakers were along the front wall and where the back wall would be on very tall stands. Highlights of the rest of the system include that I used Yamaha's BD-A1040 Blu-ray player, And I also use Blue Jeans 12 gauge cable to wire everything up. So I started my critical listening by firing up my standard suite of content, including Cassandra Wilson's Another Country off the free hdtracks.com high-definition sampler. That's a 24-bit 96 kilohertz recording. And then some CD quality recordings of Feist, The Limit to Your Love, and Greg Brown's Sleeper off his Dream Cafe album. My primary speakers are the Legacy Studio HD, which are 4-ohm speakers, and so they do present a little bit of a challenge for anemic amplifiers to push. However, certainly in this case, Yamaha had more than enough power in its reserves to push those speakers, and I had no concerns with running out of gas limited headroom, let's say. I had no concerns with distortion. Everything that I listened to sounded clean and clear and exactly how it should when everything's performing well. So overall, I would say Yamaha, in terms of their power, in terms of their ability to handle low impedance speaker systems, no issues whatsoever. With standard stereo listening out of the way, it was time to test drive this new Atmos format. And we're actually going to have another article and another video with some really deep impressions of what the Atmos listening consisted of here. But what I really wanted to test out was Yamaha's implementation of the immersive audio format, especially given that Yamaha has been doing Presence speakers, their own version of height speakers, for many, many years now. And so what I did is I compared the Atmos content through an Atmos decoder versus listening to that same content through Yamaha's Presence speaker technology, which has been out for a long time, versus listening to that same content with no height channels, a standard 5.1 setup like most of us have in our home theaters currently. I was actually really impressed with the Dolby Atmos setup. There's this part of the demo where this little helicopter seed, I'm not sure what the proper name for that is, kind of swirls around the room. There's insects buzzing overhead. You hear the wind blow. Those were all distinctly placed in a three-dimensional setup, even though my speakers weren't overhead. They were only at the front and at the behind. And so overall, with Dolby content, I was really impressed at the effect that was achieved. Switching over to the Yamaha Presence system, I found that it was similar, but not as distinctly placed. That is, there's one point where an insect kind of hovers in the upper right-hand corner, and that was very clear with the Dolby Atmos setup. The Presence speakers, which of course were just kind of guessing at what that height content might be, didn't place those sound cues exactly where they belong. That's to be expected, no surprises there. So moving away from Dolby Atmos encoded content, however, I put on some standard 5.1 content and wanted to see what upmixing this material to a full immersion experience with Atmos or the Yamaha Presence technology would sound like. So I selected an episode of New Girl. Do not judge me. That show has its moments. So I picked an episode of New Girl where they were doing some shopping in a shopping mall, and there's all this sound around, this ambient sound, kind of a cacophony of murmurs in this large shopping mall scene. And I thought that the Atmos upmixer and the Yamaha Presence speakers were both very close. I would say I couldn't give an advantage to one over the other, but both, in my opinion, were slightly superior to a standard 5.1 setup. I did feel a real heightening of the front image, and I have a pretty large screen, 92 inches projection screen. I sit about 10, 11 feet away from that, and so it's a fairly immersive environment, but with that huge height of the screen itself, oftentimes the sound doesn't always match the height of the image. That was not the case using the front speakers, and so I was really impressed with the effect there. However, once we got to two-channel music, once again going back to Cassandra Wilson and Feist and Greg Brown, things got a little dicey. The problem lies that Atmos with non-Atmos content really has to guess when it's upmixing two height channels. And as a result, particularly on Greg Brown's Sleeper, which already has a fair amount of reverb, excuse me, the reverb just became cavernous. It sounded like he was singing in this huge hard-walled cathedral or some giant cave somewhere. It got cartoonish. It masked the fine details of the recording. And so in this instance, the Atmos setting was guessing the wrong thing, and it was creating a really unpleasant experience that frankly I didn't want to listen to. The same held true with Feist's A Limit to Your Love. I would say that things weren't quite as wacky, except in one instance, and that was with the hi-hat and cymbal hits. For whatever reason, the hi-hat and cymbal hits were reproduced in almost, it seemed like, every single channel, and so I was just surrounded by hi-hats zooming overhead, whereas the rest of the drum kit stayed up front. Again, Atmos and Yamaha Presence are both guessing, but I would say that Atmos was committing more egregious errors here than Yamaha's Presence system. At the end of the day, for Atmos content, there is no question. The best way to listen to Atmos-enabled content is through an Atmos setup. When it comes to standard 5.1 movie or video content, I thought that the Atmos and Yamaha's technologies provided a slight improvement over what you might get out of a standard 5.1, but they're again very slight, and I would say most noticeable in the height of the front image. When it comes to music, however, Atmos and the Yamaha Presence, no bueno. Stay away from those, in my opinion. So in conclusion, there's a lot to like about the Yamaha RX-A2040 audio-video receiver. You're getting plenty of power. You're getting a good-looking unit that's easy to operate from the front controls and has a nice brushed aluminum finish. You're getting a ton of flexibility, including custom installer features, but even for your standard user, it's very easy to configure up to 4 zones, audio and video zones, to spread sound throughout your house, using it to power speakers in separate rooms or outdoors or wherever you want to go with it. You have 7.2 outputs for using external amplification. You have Dolby Atmos encoding, which, and some people might disagree with me, including some folks right here in Audioholics, I think is fantastic. I love Atmos as long as you're using it with Atmos content. And so Yamaha provides you the opportunity to set up a pretty flexible, immersive audio setup there. On the downsides, the only thing I can gripe about is the remote control, and if you've watched enough of my videos, you know that I'm going to gripe about the remote control. Fortunately, the smartphone application made up for a lot of that. I would definitely be downloading the Yamaha smartphone app to use in tandem with the physical remote control. And all of this comes at about $1,700, which, when you look at similarly equipped receivers from other manufacturers, puts the Yamaha in a pretty good position of representing a great value in terms of the amount of power and the types of features that you're receiving. So overall, we're very excited to see where Yamaha is going with this Avantage line. We're very excited to see the ease of use that they're putting into their features. There's always going to be, when you get into complex home theater setups, there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve, but Yamaha does its best to keep things simple, especially given the easy front panel controls, the memory settings that you can store specific settings into. With a little bit of training, anyone in your house, all the way from toddlers to domestic partners, should be able to operate this unit quite simply, which means that it has the best of both worlds. It's built for a lifestyle where not everybody wants to crack open the manual and deep dive into the receiver, but for those that do want to get into that, for those that do want to take advantage of all the features and all the power that Yamaha has to offer, they're present all the way up to the immersive audio experience from Yamaha Presence or Dolby Atmos technology. So overall, the receiver is a winner. You should check it out, and we're excited to see what Yamaha has coming down the pipe. Do remember to tune in to Audioholics.com for the full written review. Do keep in track of our YouTube channel by subscribing. We're putting up videos about once a week, if not more frequently, addressing some of the most often asked questions and most debated topics in home theater and consumer audio and video. Audioholics is your place to go to get the real scoop on everything that's happening inside this industry. Thanks a lot for watching. We'll see you again soon.